What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the latest episode of The Layup.Line. My name is Dolos, and in today's episode, I actually have a returning guest. I have Dimitri of KangzDraft back on the show with me today. He was on a previous episode as we were discussing the Sacramento Kings hiring new head coach Mike Brown, but he's back now because since that episode recorded, the Kings jumped to land the fourth overall pick in this 2022 draft. So I've currently got a series going where I've been speaking with guests from each of the teams in the top five, and I'm making my way down, just discussing the options at the top five pick, contextualizing the current roster of that team. And so Dimitri was the perfect guest to have back on the show because we already started doing some of that stuff. So, I'm going to give Dimitri the floor. If you watched the previous episode, you've already heard of him. He's, a knower of basketball. This guy knows hoops. So, I'm happy to have him here.
What's up, guys? It's good to be back. And I mean, for a great reason nonetheless, right? We jumped up in the lottery, biggest jump in the whole lottery. I mean, I saw some Kings fans. I think we jumped up 3 spots. And I saw some Kings fans that weren't happy with that, man. I've seen some people that were kind of ungrateful with that. They were like, man, like this top 3, we really need a forward. Like if we could have jumped up one more spot, but nah, man, we took the biggest jump in the whole lottery. I'll take that. I'm grateful for that every single day. I personally think I'm of the mindset. I know some people think it's a top 3 draft. I've always thought it was a top 4 draft this year. I think Jaden Ivey is very much part of that top 4. I actually have him top 3 on my own personal board. But we'll get into who he's above later.
Okay. I'm glad you get that little sport because that was one of the questions I had coming into this. Just a lot of people are saying this is a 3-person draft and the Kings land at 4. Obviously, there's still going to be great talents to pick there. So, I can't wait to dive into that. And normally I start this by kind of contextualizing the current roster that the team, that I'm covering has and that they're about to add this pick to. We've already done most of that work in the previous episode, just kind of talking about this current Kings roster, talking about Sabonis since he's been traded here. De'Aaron Fox is fit with him. So if you missed all of that, definitely go check out that previous episode we did. And since we did some of that, I'm going to kind of skip into that and just dive directly into the draft stuff. Like you said, this has been discussed as a three-person draft. I've already kind of went through those top 3 teams. So just at 4, the kind of consensus who a lot of people are saying is the 4th guy is Jaden Ivey. What are your thoughts on potentially adding him to this roster?
Man, I'm super excited to add any of the top 4. Like I said, I think when people look at the top 4, they might naturally think that Chet and Jabari, they definitely would fit on the Kings. We're a team that needs shooting and rim protection more than anything else. This is one of the biggest things I talked about when I was on last time. Mm-hmm. When you look at just if you look at any sheer block numbers or you look at sheer just shots affected at the rim, percentages of people, what percentages they're hitting at the rim. Barnes and Sabonis, pretty much one of the worst front courts in the entire league when it comes to that. They're not going to disrupt any shots really at the rim or in the paint. So that's getting like a guy like Chet or Jabari would be huge for that. But even guys like Paolo or Ivy, this team has a talent problem at the end of the day. I don't really think we have like 5 starting caliber players on the floor at all. Like for even most of the game, to be honest with you. So just getting one of those guys would be huge. I mean, Ivy would be such a great cutter when it comes to the rim for Sabonis. And then Paolo, everybody says, oh, they'll take up the same space. They want the ball in their hands and they'll work in the post and stuff like that. But I honestly think it would be such a unique dynamic offense with him and Sabonis. I mean, you're talking about 2 forwards who one of them could be constantly the handler, or one of them could be the handler and one of them could be the roller. And you could even play one of them, like you could occasionally even play them as the popper, which I think is just so unique. They could both play off each other in so many ways. The playbook would be opened up in a lot of ways teams just can't do. So I'm a huge fan of Paulo Sabonis personally. I think, we can't really look at fit. I think when you look at this top 4, it's clearly above the rest of everybody else in this draft. As prospects right now. And I think those 4 also end up probably having the best careers realistically. So yeah, I mean, it's got to be pretty obvious. More than any fit problem, this team is a talent problem, and there's clearly a top four BPA in this draft. So that's what we got to go with.
Yeah, I haven't given too much consideration to Paolo landing there just because I think he's projected to not slip past that top three by most people, but I'm kind of intrigued by that. Like now that you really mention it, I think I'd really like to see him play with De'Aaron offensively, like you mentioned. Him and Sabonis, either of them could be the ball handler in a pick and roll. That's a very difficult action to cover because do you switch that? Like what team has the personnel to really comfortably switch that matchup a lot? So I think that could make some interesting noise.
Yeah, and Paolo's mom was actually a fun fact. Two of the top four players this year had parents that played professional ball in Sacramento. So you have Paolo's mom. I think her name is Rhonda Banquero.
Mhm.
Correct me on that if I'm wrong. She played for the Sacramento Monarchs, and then obviously Jabari Smith Jr.'s dad played for the Sacramento Kings. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see both of those players. Chet and Ivy's parents, they didn't do anything with the Kings, but those two in the top four have actually had like familial connections to Sacramento basketball organizations, which is really, really interesting. If either of those players ended up, I'm not saying Jabari or Paolo are likely to end up in Sac, but if either player did end up in Sac, it's kind of cool that they'd have this like family tie here.
Yeah, that'd be a huge and important key piece to everything too. Um, one thing that you kind of touched on with this fourth overall pick is just the kind of discussion between straddling between picking for fit and picking between best player available. And that's something that I've touched on with like the previous guests in the previous three episodes. And we've actually used Sacramento as an example of this because, there's the super famous 2018 draft where, Sacramento, they pick Marvin Bagley. And in a vacuum, you could make the argument of, hey, does Luka fit with De'Aaron Fox? And, shouldn't we just add a big guy here? And so, on some level, that pick made sense. But just given the actual talent gap between best player available, and Luka was by far the best player available, hindsight has shown us that they clearly should have selected Luka Doncic. And so, now in this draft, I think you make the interesting point of like, you're once again in a situation of straddling between picking for fit and best player available, where Jaden Ivey is presumed to be the best player left on the board when it comes down to four, but he's also a guard. Do you want to play him next to De'Aaron when you just had to ship out Tyrese for, some fit concerns potentially in your guard room, and you had just selected Davion Mitchell last year, who, not necessarily saying he's someone that should block you from drafting another guard, but just to, being cognizant of the somewhat of a logjam that there is there. Do you have any kind of hesitance to take Ivy just based on that, or just your full on go, he's best player available? I don't care if he fits with Fox or not. I just want to add the best talent.
Yeah, I'm pretty much there. I have really no problem with like Davion and DDV because I'm assuming we're bringing back Dante.
Mhm.
If Davion and DDV are like kind of a mini poverty version of like Smart and White off the bench, I'm okay with
Yeah.
that, bro. Like to be honest, I'm absolutely fine with that. And then you could start Fox and Ivy, who are absolutely just dynamic cutters to the rim with
Mhm.
Sabonis, and I think they play off each other pretty well. So I think if you have those four as your starting guards, you're actually pretty deep as far as you're starting four guards, and you look pretty good. So I don't entirely mind that. And I think the other thing is that, bro, Fox has got to start working with other players. He's got to start making the players around him better. Like that's one thing is I love Fox. He gets his numbers, but like one thing about him his whole career is pretty much that he's never really made the players around him better. He's a good he can make plays, but I don't know if he's a passer like that. He's a 6, 7 assists guy, but I don't know if he'll ever be like an 8, 9 assists kind of guy with like genuinely really productive playmaking that makes your team or like passing that makes your team way better. So yeah, I mean Fox. There are definitely aspects Fox needs to get better at, and making his teammates better and putting them in situations to succeed, and also just being a better defender at the point of attack, or at least being more engaged. Because when he is engaged, Fox moves his feet faster than anybody else. Everybody knows that because he has to carry a lot of that offensive load. But I feel like for the past 2 years, just not having that help on the defensive end, and if he doesn't go full out on offense, we just get absolutely outscored. So I feel like he's just probably a little bit less tired and motivated than he was before on that end, which is understandable.
Yeah, true. And that was one of the things we talked about. Fox had been a better defender early in his career, so that's something that you want to see him getting back to. As far as the playmaking, I totally agree. He can help his team a lot more by just getting off the ball sooner, like just more frequently cutting when he doesn't have it. Maybe even set screens when you're off ball to open guys up. Just doing
I think a
those
lot of the
kind of
success
those
is going to
little
be
things.
Sabonis as a passing hub to really quick cutters like Fox and Ivy. I mean, that's the vision, right? I think that's Monty's vision when he traded for Sabonis. I have to imagine, like, because all of Fox's numbers went up, and like we were using Sabonis as a passer and a screener a lot more, and Fox's passing numbers went up too, interestingly. But I think if we just keep using Sabonis as this handoff passing hub with Ivy and Fox, and I've always been a big proponent of trading Barnes, that because sort of just how badly he fits defensively and how much of a slow sort of post-ish sort of get my free throws player he is, and we want to play really fast, diving to the rim and stuff like that. So I think if you can look at maybe moving Barnes, maybe I wouldn't say this year's pick obviously, but like the 2023 first, like protected, or like if because we are adding Ivy, I wouldn't be opposed to moving Barnes and Davion. Maybe you look at the market for like, I don't know, like a John Collins or something. I actually wouldn't mind John Collins on this team at all. I've heard Atlanta's trying to get off his contract, and while he isn't the best defender in the world, I do think he's tad untapped as a rim protector due to playing next to Capella, because he's really just not thrust into that role. And then you're looking at his fit next to Sabonis. You're looking at a guy who can dive to the rim and get there, and is just an absolutely vicious dunker, honestly, when he gets there. And he's a guy that over the past 2-3 seasons has shot like 38% from the three. So he's a guy that could just be a really useful spot up shooter, a popper, a cutter, another guy who could just work really well next to Sabonis, and who might honestly be a little untapped as far as a rim protector. So he might do the things we need defensively if we put him into that specific box, that specific role. And then as an offensive player, I think he'd play really, really well off the guys we have.
Yeah, I'm not as sold on John Collins defensively. I think I'd have to be talked into that a little more.
I don't think he's a good defender by any means. I just think if we put him in a very specific box, like he might be able to be decent. But no, I think you need to surround him with even more defenders like that. You need a good defender at the three. And it's just like, if you look at the market right now, I don't see any particularly enticing four defenders. Like we've talked, Kings group chat has talked about John Isaac, but also like that dude hasn't played basketball in like 2 years, and like just the shit he's doing right now, his extracurricular activities, I'm not a fan of. I'll just put it that way. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough right now when you look at the market.
Yeah, a ton of concern with him. But I think the one like super underrated potential guy that could be had is PJ Washington, and I think he's someone that would fit well with what Sacramento does, and maybe even a little bit better than John Collins, because I think PJ's at least shown more like defensively. He's kind of been a switch guy. He's been one of the more sturdy defenders that Charlotte has had, and they've generally been a weak defense, but I think he's one of the stronger pieces that they have there. And where Collins, I think I have defensive concerns about him in general, and then pair him with Sabonis, and I just think like it's really hard to have an average defense with those two.
It would be. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's my viewpoint on it. But I'm curious, kind of just getting a little bit back to that fourth pick, because while we're talking about trades, that pick has been rumored to be potentially on the move. Maybe they're looking to move up, maybe they're looking to move down, but this is a front office that's obviously looking to make a win now splash. They want to end that playoff drought. And I think if a move opens up to add a veteran in exchange for that fourth pick, they're listening far more than any other team in the top five would.
Yeah.
So just, what are your thoughts on the idea that the Kings would potentially move that fourth pick?
I mean, it scares me. I wouldn't, like, going back to Collins, I wouldn't move it for Collins. That wouldn't be a consideration whatsoever. Even if Atlanta was like, yo, we'll include 16. Like, I'm not moving back to 16 for Collins. I don't think it's worth it. To be honest with you, I don't.
Okay. Are there like any, veterans or, fringe all-stars that you think you would move the pick for?
To be honest, I don't really think so. I mean, it's tough. Like, I don't think I would. If you're talking about like fringe all stars that would be on the market and would be available for the pick, probably not. Like, the calls we might get are like Randall, and I'm like, dude, playing Randall with Julius, like, or not Julius, playing Randall with Sabonis. Yeah, I meant Sabonis, not Julius, and Fox. Oh my god, that would be a war crime on offense. The bricks would be so loud you'd hear them out of Golden One. Like, there's no way. There's no way that's ever happening. But like, okay, and this is pie in the sky, obviously. So like, hold back. I know this isn't happening, but like, one guy I would do it for is Donovan Mitchell. It's never happening. It's never, ever, 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 ever happening. Ever, 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 ever. But
that's an interesting one.
If Utah were like, yo, we really, really like Jaden Ivey, we know Donovan's gone and we want to restart the clock on a rookie contract, you toss some Donovan Mitchell and like future picks and like, not Donovan Mitchell, Davion Mitchell. So they have Davion Mitchell and they have Ivy. They have a bunch of future picks. I don't know that like, if Donovan knows he's gone, like, I don't know how Utah feels about that package. They probably don't take it, to be honest with you, but I don't think it's the worst package they could take either. I think Ivy's going to be really good, and he could be a really solid replacement for Donovan. But yeah, that's kind of the idea of like who I would prefer to trade it for. Like, I wouldn't want to trade it for like Collins or like Randall. I don't know. I don't know if there's a middle ground that you can think of between those two kinds of players. Like, I'd get on the KD market, but I don't think he'll be available either, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think the Nets are going to blow it up if they're any smart right now. So.
Yeah, Donovan was one of the names I kind of thought of just off the top of my head, but like, agreed, that's a situation where he'd really have to put pressure on the organization to move him.
Same with KD.
Yeah, it's not clear like how close he is to actually being there. So I actually think the fourth pick would probably be one of the better returns that the Jazz would be able to get for him if he just demanded outright now. And they're just looking to reset their timeline. Why not get the fourth pick and potential Mitchell replacement right there at 4 and Jaden Ivey. But just I do want to just spitball some other things because Jaden Ivey might not be the pick. We could see Sacramento decide that they're concerned about the fit with Fox and they want to take someone at a different they want to take someone at a different position. So, you already mentioned to me before we got going that you kind of have a top 10 in mind for like what you'd want to see in this pick. So let's just make our way down that top 10. And so after Ivey, who do you have in mind as like the next best guy for Sacramento to take here?
Oh God, wait. Are you asking the next person on my board? I have Jaden Ivey 3 and I have Jabari Smith 4, bro.
Oh wow. That is
Jabari Smith has the smallest bag in this whole draft. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like the production off the dribble is a little bit concerning to me. I think 77% of his shots were assisted or something like that. Like, I don't know. I think he's really good. Like, he'll be like Chris Middleton plus, and he's going to be an all-star. I do genuinely think Jabari Smith will be an all-star. I just think he's got the smallest bag of all of them. Like, he'll be a good defender. He'll be a good shooter, but I don't think he'll be a primary creator on his team. And with Chet is like 2, 3, 4 is actually really close to me. Like Chet, Ivy, Jabari. I have Paolo 1, and I think there's some decent separation there, to be honest. I think Paolo, out of everybody in this draft, stands the way best chance of being a number 1 option. He's got the deepest scoring bag. He's got the most tools in his kit as far as just what he can do as far as getting to the rim. Jabari doesn't get to the rim. That's another thing. I forget exactly what his percentages are, but he's a horrible finisher at the rim for a guy his size. So, yeah, as far as, like, shooting off the dribble, getting to the rim, having an actual, like, full bag of tricks that you can really pull out there, I definitely prefer Paolo over Jabari. And then basically Chet versus Ivy is like a hair. The big thing with Chet is I get mad FOMO with him, man. Like, I look at that body and I look at the things he can do, and I'm like, yeah, like he could definitely be like incredible. Like the ceiling on him is huge, and I know it's corny. I'm not saying exactly, like, I'm not saying the whole like deadlift thing, like, oh, Kevin Durant, he can't deadlift, like he's skinny as a twig. No. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like, I think that's really corny, but like, the player strength doesn't have to do with anything, but I am concerned about like his build and injuries. Like, guys with that kind of build, like KP and like Yeah, I mean, if you look at mostly KP and like guys of that kind of size and that kind of build, like that thinness, like even KD wasn't that. I don't think he was that thin coming into the league, and even when Wembanyama next year is like Vic, Vic, right?
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
how he's really skinny, really,
Hmm.
really skinny guy. I think he's like 230, 240. Chet is like 190, 195. So the difference is still massive when you really think about it. It's like 35, 40 pounds.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be relevant in an NBA basketball game every day of the week. So I do think as far as Chet is concerned, I get mad FOMO with what he could be. Like he's huge and he's super talented. He's a great defender. I do have some fears with what, like the injuries and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
I think I have him as the second best player because of that. And then third it would be Jabari or not Jabari, Ivy,
Yep.
Jaden Ivy, because I mean Jaden Ivy is just so fast, bro. He's like the most, I'd say the best athlete in the draft. Just because, I mean, you see how fast he runs. He's going to be one of those guys that, like, I was trying to think, like with Fox, if we put him next to Fox, is that going to be one of the fastest backcourts of all time? Like, it
Yeah, it's
very
up
well
there.
might be.
Yeah, it's
It
up
very,
there.
very well might be.
Yeah. Not a lot of backcourts are really even coming close to that level of speed.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, it would just be those two would be ridiculous together because, I mean, Ivy's just such a force going to the rim. He's so fluid too. Like when you see him finish and just get around hands that are trying to contest his shot at the rim, it's really, really just beautiful to watch. He's so smooth with it, and he just, he almost knows where the hand is going to be, and he just moves it in advance, just getting around things and just able to finish through contact with ease. And I do have a little bit more faith in him as a shooter, despite him being in the mid 30s. He seems real, like his mom's a coach, and he seems super like into getting better. And his free throw percentage isn't complete crap. I think it's in the 70s. It's not like horrible like we've seen some people with questionable shots come into the league with.
mhm.
So I think he can be like a John Morant level shooter, and that's more than enough for a slasher like him. And at number four, I kind of alluded to it, why he's here. But Jabari, and it's really close between 2 to 4. But the thing with Jabari is that I just think not while also being like a questionable finisher at the rim for his size, he's
Mhm.
also just got I would say the least deep bag of them all. Like he really can't like he does have a bit of a handle, but it's something he's gonna go and have to improve on consistently because it's not it's I think it's the worst one out of the top 4. Yeah, definitely the worst one out of the top 4. And just something he's definitely going to have to get better at. And with a weak handle, questionable finishing at the rim, and I'm not sure if he's going to be a primary shot creator. I don't know if I can put that in the top 3 necessarily. I see a primary shot creator more in Ivy. I see it more in Chet, and I see it more in, well, maybe less in Chet than Ivy, but I see it more in Chet, Ivy, and Paolo than I do in Jabari, nonetheless. So that would be my top 4. Those are the big 4, obviously. And then sitting at number 5, I have Jalen Duran. I actually love Jalen Duran. I think he's just absolutely an athletic freak. He's able to switch freely for a guy his size. That's really, really special. And
Mhm.
I think he's just got a lot of developing skills. I've seen him hit a few mid-range jumpers, and I've seen him hit a few shots that are just like, yeah, like there could be more here if he really improves on it. So I really do like Jalen, and I think the sky's the limit for him. But even so, I think with him, especially compared to the rest of the top 10, which is a little unstable this year, you're looking at a guy who basically can't fail, in my opinion. At worst, he's like a very good bench center. At very, very worst. But I think he's going to be a starter in this league for years to come. And then going off of those top 5, I would say after this, it kind of becomes questionable on whether or
Mhm.
not these guys will actually end up sticking in the league for 5+ years or not. I'd say the top 5 guys, to me, the big difference between the top 5 guys and the rest is that I see the top 5 guys sticking in the league for like a very, very long time. And then 6 and below, we'll see how it goes. But number 6, I have AJ Griffin, because I think AJ Griffin is. I mean, AJ Griffin's a guy that if he didn't have his knee injuries, I would honestly have him like possibly 5 or possibly higher. You're looking at a guy who
Yeah.
literally had a like generational shooting season without exaggeration. I mean, 98th or 97th percentile and up in like most categories. Just a guy that's able to shoot in multiple ways, and a guy that's used to have this, defensive and very athletic profile before all the knee injuries as well. So you're looking at a guy that really had it all, but now is more just of a shooting specialist and a guy that you're not going to know if he's really going to be able to hang his hat defensively. He was pretty bad defensively this year, despite coming out of high school with a good rep for it. And it has to do a lot with his knees, like especially coming back from his injuries. You had to see him ease into it a bit, which getting to it is why I'm a little bit confident, because he did come back into the season from an injury, and I think there was some easing in that happened. And I think once you get to the NBA, you're going to see that injury be further away, and you're going to see him do better as a result. Because I do think AJ, like Sharp, which we'll get to later, has pretty much one of the highest ceilings in the draft. I mean, if AJ can get past these early injuries and can hit on his potential, he could be a potential, 18, 20 points a game per scorer. He could be like the kind of, I don't know if it's the best comparison, but he could be the OG Anunoby-ish of this draft, where early injuries cause him to slide more than he should have. And he ends up being a really, good defensive wing who can shoot and who can just really be the defensive anchor for your team. It should have went a lot higher than he did. I don't know if he'll definitely never be the defender OG would, but if he can get past his knee issues, I am somewhat excited for him. His dad is a coach, so he does have. I do believe that he has good instincts. Like his dad is the assistant coach of the Toronto Raptors. He's been around Nick Nurse. He's been around Tom Thibodeau's defensive system. I do have some faith in the fact that AJ Griffin will be able to rebound on his defensive ball knowledge, just because of the connections, the people he knows. But it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work. Like I said, as opposed to the top 5 guys, he's definitely not a lock to be in the league. He could just fall out like any of these guys that I'm listing after him. So 7th, I have.
So I'm actually going to cut you off before you touch on the 7th, because as far as like the first 3 bigs, like this has really been going a lot in line with the previous episodes I've done, where it's Paolo essentially has really separated in your opinion and Cooper Klein's opinion, Zay's opinion. Paolo
everybody who actually knows this draft and knows ball is saying like Paolo. Everybody I've talked to as well, bro. Like everybody's on Paolo, and
this series has pretty much been the Paolo propaganda network at this point, with just how often I'm bringing on guests to hype him up. And Chet, I think right there in line as well, and just the very high upside, like insane upside that he has with his skill set. But I think each of the guests has also had some reservations in just how difficult he is to project, especially with that frame. Like I've said it, I'm not a draft guy, but I think, as an exec, I'd be a little concerned drafting him, just because I think out of those top 3, there is like a much higher chance that he busts just like off the frame, potentially not working.
The injury, bro. The injury risk is huge.
Yeah. So like he's someone I'd have concerns with, and your opinions on Jabari maybe being more like the 4th or 5th pick than necessarily the 3rd. That's right in line with my other guests and their thoughts as well. I've had a bunch of people like commenting like in defense of Jabari. They're saying his handle is better than we're giving it credit for. So just credit to those people. Like, hey, there's some people in the comments that are more. Yeah, there are some people that believe in Jabari a bit more than that have kind of suggested that he's worthy of like that 2nd or 1st overall pick.
Yeah, he's a guy that goes into the lab and works really hard. From what I can tell and what I've heard online, he's a guy that works super hard every year on something. So I wouldn't be surprised. Like PG is a guy that I was reading his scouting report and stuff like that. He's not a guy that was known for his passing at all in college. And like I'm pretty sure the scouting report said he had a pretty weak handle too, which is really interesting to read when you come and you look at Jabari now. So if he's a guy that works in the gym, and I can see it, man. Like I said, I have the top 4 in all the same tier. Despite how much I was like hyping up Paolo, I have all 4 of them in the same tier. I do think that if you prefer one over the other, sure, go for it. I think it's a mistake not to take Paolo number 1, but I have all 4 in the same tier. Like if you want one, go ahead and take it. Because I think all 4, like I said, I think all 4 of these players are going to be in the league for a long time. I think Duren is too, but I don't think Duren is on the same sort of level as the top 4. Obviously, I wouldn't include him there.
Yeah, and he was the guy I wanted to get, because I was a little caught off guard by his inclusion on here. I've kind of seen him more mocked like 7th through 14th range. And just generally, like, from my philosophy and my viewpoint of basketball, like, I think it's a bit risky to draft a big of his profile this high, just because I think, like, the skill set he brings, like, I'm totally in agreement where this guy can potentially be a very solid backup big for his entire career. But like, that's something you can find in free agency for a fairly low cost. And so I'd prioritize using a high draft pick on, wings or guards that have at least the upside to be more. But I see what you're saying. And this is a known commodity who could be very good in the league, who fits a need on this team. I'd love to see, like, if they have in mind taking Duren, I think they should trade back for him. That'd be the perfect situation where it's like you get to move back to maybe that 12 spot to with Oklahoma City, and he's probably still available there, in my opinion. But like I said, I'm not a draft guy, so
I don't
take
think
that
he'll
with a
make
grain of
it past
salt.
like 9-ish, to be honest with you. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's going to be tough with Jern. I mean, he could fall. He could fall. If the thing with Jern is, I actually don't think I'm going to have any other big in the lottery, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my not my mock lotto, because I'll technically have Mark Williams to with Charlotte just because that's an easy pick. But
Sure.
as far as my board lottery, no, I won't probably have a big in another big in the lottery. So it's yeah, I mean, I think Jordan is just special, man. He's a special talent. You don't see someone that's got shoulders built like that. Like that. I mean, his shoulders are bowling balls, and he's just so like for his age. I mean, the frame he's putting out at like he was putting out at 17 years old is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the league. I think he's so athletic and explosive and strong, just so strong that and so quick on switches that he's going to be a problem. He's going to be like, I think Rob Williams plus at the very least. So I think, yeah, I think he's a guy that I really am sold on, and I think he's absolutely worth taking. When I say he'll be at the very least a backup big, I mean, yeah, at the very least
Mm-hmm.
he'll be a backup big, but I don't think that's what he'll end up being. Really, when it's said and done, I think he's going to be an awesome player. Yeah, I think he's going to be an awesome player that, yeah, sure, if you want to run him off the bench like Rob Will, you can, but if you want to go big and start him, go ahead as well, because
Yeah.
he's be a guy that brings not only like that athleticism and that defensive versatility, but just this competitive fire, this scream, the dog, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
getting everybody in the match and getting everybody really engaged just by his sheer will to win. So yeah, I'm a big Duren fan. I think he'll be not only will he be athletic, he'll be a good influence on the team. He'll just like he'll be a great finisher. I mean, he's got a lot to work with.
Yeah, he pretty much represents everything that I kind of like in a big man. Rim protector. He also has a little bit of chops defending on the perimeter, rim runner, lob finisher, play finisher, that kind of guy. The other guy you mentioned has also been another guy that's gotten a ton of love on these shows. Is AJ Griffin. My Rockets guest Cooper Klein, also Nazay, my Magic guest. Both of those guys said they, would think about drafting Griffin, maybe even in the top three.
Mm-hmm.
They still mention the injury concerns that he had in college.
Only
So
reason he's fallen, really.
yeah, that's something that, like, NBA personnel are going to have a lot better feel for by the time the draft rolls around. But talent wise, they were huge believers in this guy. Like you said, like, I think you even mentioned just kind of describing him more of a wing, and that was something Cooper described to me, where he played the two in college, but Cooper sees him more of as a forward, as a three, maybe even small ball four type, and
Yeah.
that's why he's able to kind of view a better ceiling for him defensively if he's not expected to guard guards and can use his wide shoulders to be on wings instead. So I think with his shooting ability, simply in the athleticism, like, that's a very enticing prospect just off of those two things there.
Yeah, and
So
also just like, why would you put? I don't know, like what? It's a question mark on why you would put a guy with a cook knee at the 2 guard instead of 3. But
mhm,
yeah,
yeah,
I think AJ. I do agree with the idea that AJ was misused in college, as a
mhm.
lot of prospects typically are. Uh, because yeah, college.
Yeah, yeah. And then so you were getting onto your seventh guy, I think it was.
Yeah, and it's not Shaden Sharp yet. It's Dyson Daniels. I mean, Dyson is a lot of people go and call Dyson a point wing. Point guard. I blew it. I'm gonna go ahead and call him a point wing because that's really what he is. I think point wing is something I don't know. I think I go guard wing, forward big pretty much, and then if you're like someone that's able to handle the rock and really run a half court offense, then throw a point title in front of that. But yeah, I think he's a point wing more than anything. That's a guy, Dyson Daniels, that I would actually look at if I were the Kings trading back. You're looking at a guy who's super defensively versatile, who's able to, and I think he measured it. He was supposed to be 6'6". I think he measured in at 6'7" at the combine or something like that. So 6'7", 6'8" with shoes. I don't know. So it's something pretty spicy. So yeah, Dyson Daniels is bigger than expected, and he's just super defensively versatile. Shot only got better as the season went on, and it is a work in progress. Like that's one thing that does scare me, and I do think we'll just end up picking it 4 in all seriousness. But if we do end up moving back, Dyson Daniels would be pretty cool. I mean, he's a guy that could do a little bit of everything. Could be a little bit of that playmaker here. Could handle the rock once Fox is out. He could be that 3 guard if we need him to be versatile in the lineups. The thing with Dyson is cool is that he can basically play all 4 positions. So if you need to like move him around and like slide him, he's versatile in a lot of lineups. So he could fill in a lot of holes, which is what this Kings team does really need because we just have a lot of holes. But more than holes, we have a talent issue, like I said. So I think taking Ivy is the key. But I think there will be a really lucky team that gets Dyson Daniels. Like if I'm the Wizards or something, I really wouldn't mind it at all. If I'm the Spurs, I'd be pretty happy with it. Even the Pistons, I would consider it because you haven't heard me say Keegan Murray yet. So
yeah, that's another guy that I wanted to get into. And maybe we'll have him next. Since we've wrapped on your 7th guy, and Keegan Murray still hasn't appeared. I'm curious who you have up next in line here.
Yeah, neither is Shaden Sharp really. So at 8th we have Shaden Sharp. So Shaden Sharp is the biggest question mark in the draft, and somebody I should be supporting because I feel so bad having my Canadian boys Shaden Sharp and Ben Mathurin this low. Mathurin might actually end up above Sharp. 8-9 is really close. Just spoiler, Mathurin's up next, but I think the thing with Sharp is that I also get a little bit of FOMO with him. Like he's actually a guy that I had higher than Dyson before this, but I don't know. I think his reluctantness to do anything at the combine, and I know it's really bad to base off like combine videos, but like we haven't seen any recent footage from this guy. Like, listen, if it was any other prospect, I'd say it's super silly to be looking at anything from the combine. But with Shaden, like, what do we have to look at from the past 12 months? Seriously. Like, there's been nothing. There's been no ball. There's been no practices even. I mean, he hasn't shown up to practices from what I've heard. Like, this is a guy that, especially if you're the Kings and you already have a culture problem with guys that didn't really necessarily want to show up to practices or didn't want to show up. Like, Bagley walked out in games sometimes. Like, I don't think, especially if you're an owner, like, if you're an owner like Monty McNair and you're or not owner, if you're a GM like Monty McNair and your owner, Vivek Ranadive, has told you you have a playoff mandate, make the playoffs or you're losing your job. You're not picking a guy who hasn't played like since high school. Like that's just flat out what's going on here. Yeah. Like it's not happening. Shaden is explosive, yes, super explosive guy. The footwork on his moves and what he's able to do is technically pretty impressive, but from what I can see personally, and I could be completely wrong on this because Shaden scares the shit out of me, but from what I have seen, it looks slow to me. Like that's one thing I have heard about the handle, and from what I have seen, it's held fairly true, is that the handle is a little bit weak for Shaden, and it is a little bit exploitable. And if you're like a guard that's going to be creating all these kinds of shots, I don't think your handle can be super exploitable like that. Like when I was watching him, especially in the more recent stuff, like it seemed slow. It seemed really slow to me. And it seemed like a lot of what he was doing was just dunks and trying to show off his athleticism and avoiding scouts as much as possible. So I don't know. I've been souring on Shaden as of late. Generally, I tends to work out when I sour on a prospect this late on the process. I soured on Neesmith a few years ago. really hard before the draft process, and that turned out pretty correct. So I'm gonna go with my gut here, and I might have Shaden Sharp one spot higher, but actually maybe lower than this come draft time, just because I really would have liked to have just seen more from him, and what I did see from him was slightly concerning. So yeah, moving on to the next one, Ben Mathurin at number 9. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but Mathurin is a guy that if you look at the offensive tape and you were just to look at the highlights, you probably have him higher than this. Just the fact that he's able to be so explosive going to the rim. Again, another guy that's able to create his own shot, but might not be the best 3-point shooter in the top 10, but still able to create his own shot. And a guy that on the ball can be pretty engaged as a defender and pretty exciting. A guy that some teams may look at and be like, he's a well-rounded player. And in some aspects he is, but I personally wouldn't say he's the most well-rounded player in this top 10 by a mile. I do think there are some very, very glaring issues when it comes to the off-ball awareness with Ben Mathurin. It's his biggest weakness, and that's something he's gonna have to work on. And that's what, as far as a Kings specific fit, I dread it, because if you're looking at the off-ball awareness and capabilities on the defensive end of a Ben Mathurin plus De'Aaron Fox, you're gonna have an outright disaster, in my opinion. It wouldn't be pretty at all. So, yeah, I think with Ben Mathurin, he really needs to get better at his defensive awareness off the ball. I would like him to be a slightly better shooter, but he's going to be a good prospect, and I guess more than some of the guys in front of him, like Shaden and AJ. I actually do have faith in Mathurin at least being a decent player in this league and sticking around, but being limited, but still being a good player. Albeit not having the ceiling a guy like Sharp or Griffin. He's a little bit safer, I would say.
Do you have any kind of like comps for him as far as just play style wise, who he could, like ceiling, floor, what he could look like in the NBA?
I think one of the comps that I saw online for him that wasn't too bad as far as like floor was BMAC. Like Ben McLemore. I don't think it's too bad. As far as like absolute ceiling, I really don't like comparisons. I'm gonna let you in on this. I absolutely hate copy players, because the thing is that I don't know. Every player's pretty unique, man.
Very true. Yeah, I really only ask about comps to just get like the most general sense of like the kind of positions this player is going to be put on the floor. Like they don't necessarily need to do these things as well as who you're comping them to, but just what kind of play styles and actions is he going to run, and are there any kind of comparable players as far as like maybe his efficiency level or things like that?
I don't know, maybe like a Malik Beasley wouldn't be too bad. Like somewhere in between BMAC and Malik Beasley, maybe, as far as where he lands. Yeah, I think if you get Malik Beasley out of him, like it's a win, just by Malik Beasley, but not a piece of shit human, pretty much.
Yeah, I do want to pivot back to Shaden, because he's been one of the more like fascinating prospects for me in this draft cycle, just like as someone who's not overly like into whatever's going on with the draft world. Just like I don't really pay attention until draft lottery night. And so hearing about this prospect that like people are like, is he next Paul George? He has all this talent. He didn't play at college, and a lot of people I even heard him kind of like referred to as maybe he ends up being the best player coming out of this draft. Like at the end of the day, like he has that kind of skill set and potential. And as of late, in the past few days, past week, with the combine stuff happening more, I think I've seen that perception definitely take a dip, where people aren't as confident in him anymore. And, maybe where he would have went fourth, a month ago, it's now looking more like mid to late lottery for Shaden Sharp. So I think you're kind of like right in line with what I've been just seeing on the timeline. So I just, really fascinated by that, because I was so high going into Sharp, like in this process, like, oh, people are talking about him like the next Paul George. And I'm watching some tape. I'm like, yeah, I see some Bradley Beal in his game for sure. Like,
That's the one I was closer on. Yeah, when you said PJ, I was like, because like
yeah.
he is like a little bit smaller, like definitely. Like he was supposed to measure in at 6'6" without shoes, with shoes a little bit bigger, but he measured in at I think 6'5" without shoes. So yeah, I mean, he's a guy that like, or was it 6'5" with shoes? It could be 6'5" with shoes actually. So yeah, I don't know. I think he's the guy that's, he definitely has long arms. That was
Yeah.
one thing at the combine. Like we saw the height was a little bit underwhelming, but the arms, yeah. And like just I think the biggest thing that's made a lot of people sour on him is the fact that he not only did he avoid college, like, and we were like, oh, okay, like fuck college, whatever. But like he's like not he's leaving, he's not going to scout meetings, and like he's like leaving because of like conflicts or something. Remember? I don't know if you
Oh
saw that a
yeah,
few days
yeah. I
ago.
think I
It's
did see
like
that.
what I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, like at that age, like if you're 18, 19 years old and you can be part of the NBA draft, bro, there's nothing more important than the NBA draft, bro. You're gonna make like you've got without exaggeration, millions of dollars on the line depending on your placement. Like you show up for that shit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And if he's not showing up, I think that means he's hiding, right? Like I don't know what to say, bro. Like
Yeah,
it's
that was one of the things Cooper pointed out when I, mentioned potentially taking him with the Rockets' third pick. That just like, he probably didn't play at Kentucky because it would have hurt his draft stock. And
yeah.
and so like they held him back. They, protected him in that regard. So that I kind of, I was looking back at all the stories, and I kind of see why there were some pleas to have him go back and do another year. But yeah, I gonna be
Like,
one of
how's his
those
ball
interesting
IQ going
things.
to be after like the highest level of ball you played, and you didn't participate in the practice at Kentucky, from what the reports say, either like that
Yeah.
much, that much really. So like, what's your level of ball IQ going to be going straight from high school ball into the NBA and just standing there on a court like next to LeBron James, James Harden, Kevin Durant, whoever? Like, what is that going to look like in the
Yeah.
differences of the experiences these players have versus this guy? Like, I know he's a project, and even knowing he could technically be the best player in the draft, he's so much of a project that if you're Monty McNair in his position with the way your owner's breathing down your neck,
Yeah.
you can't, bro, you can't. You'd be
Yeah.
insane. He's not going
Yeah.
to be good next year.
Way too much of a risk. And like he's one of
Well,
those
even if he is
players.
good, he's not going to be good next year.
Yeah. Yeah. That I'm totally with you on that. I was about to make the point of like he's one of those prospects we're going to have to, just measure our expectations with him. And like even if he is, kind of decent coming out the gate, like, I still think it's gonna be important to temper expectations with someone who's like missed out on that much basketball. So that was one of the points I wanted to make on Sharp. But are we at your 10th? Who I have there's some names I haven't seen
Yeah,
come
we're
up.
at
So
10.
I have some questions. I'll just let you get on to 10 then.
I'm assuming you could assume who 10 is because he hasn't popped up and he needs to pop up at this point. That's Keegan Murray.
Honestly, I did a mock-up of the thumbnail for this video, and Keegan Murray was like, I picked 3 prospects to throw on there, and Keegan Murray was one of them. So the fact he's at 10 is like, okay, I'm gonna have to adjust that. Gonna have to adjust that probably.
Here's your clickbait, all right? Jabari Smith at 4. So you put number 4 Jabari Smith, all right?
Essentially.
Number 10 Keegan Murray and number 8 Shaden Sharp. That's your clickbait right there.
Yeah, that'll get people clicking for sure. Surprised by the order in that.
Oh no, but I think my reasoning's been fairly solid around it. And I think they've all, like, as far as where I've got them, I think it's all fairly realistic placements. I mean, if Sharp ends up busting like I think he does like I think he does. I think 8 is pretty damn generous. Like, or yeah, 8. I've got him at 8 right now. So 8 is pretty damn generous for Sharp if he ends up busting as hard as I think he will. Pause, but but going on to 10, Keegan Murray. I mean, as Mike Schmitz called him, and I had to put Mike Schmitz on fraud alert for this one, the most versatile scorer in the draft. My God, that shit blew my socks off. I couldn't believe that.
Oh, wow.
You call it a post scorer, the most versatile scorer in the draft. But yeah, I don't know. With Keegan, I mean, of course, a player that's way, way older is going to dominate. And a lot of his points are made through the post. I don't know the exact percent, but like it's way more than anybody else in the top 10. And college post game is like the least translatable skill. It's the skill I have the least stock invested in, like by far. Like pull all my money out of that. I do not, especially after like, I guess you're talking to the guy who fucking had to deal with Bagley on his team the past few years. But yeah, college post game is not something that moves me personally. So when I see Keegan putting up huge numbers, it doesn't excite me in any way, shape, or form. Really, he's a good weak side rim protector. I'll give him that. He is really good weak side rim protector, and that would fit well with the Kings. Not at four. You want somebody a little bit better than what Keegan Murray could project to be at four, which I've seen people use the Harrison Barnes comp. Good Lord, that's a dog shit comp. I mean, we just talked about how bad Harrison Barnes is protecting the rim, and then we talk about how good Keegan is protecting the rim. So yeah, that confused me. But yeah, I mean, as offensive game, I could definitely see it. Like the way Barnes plays and he tries to bait fouls through the post, and the way he's able to be a pretty good shooter for free. Sure, like the offensive game, I get where you're coming from, but defensively, they're nowhere near the same player. That being said, I mean, yeah, Keegan's game is way too post reliant, I think, and also his post passing is like horrible. I'm pretty sure teammates score like on 18% of the time he passes out or something like that. Oof. Yeah, it's really rough, and he's got a lot of turnovers out the post. I think it's something that's going to get exposed a lot when he's against better players. And I think Mike Schmidt's calling him the most versatile scorer in the game or in the draft, and mocking him consistently to sack at four. I mean, it didn't make sense to me at the time, but then when he took the job with Portland, it did. Like obviously, he just wants somebody better to fall. That's literally all it is. So, as far as Mike Schmidt's mocks at this point in the season, dude's literally working for another team. So he is trying to like actively get teams ahead of him to pick the wrong things. So I would take those mocks with a grain of salt. I'm being completely serious here. I would take those mocks with a heavy grain of salt at this point, because Keegan Murray is obviously not the right pick at four for the Kings. Let's just be straight honest about that. It would be an absolute disaster if they outright took Keegan at four. Sure, he'll be like a good player next year, and like if you want to win games next year, maybe he helps with a couple. But like if you're looking at like, I think Jaden Ivey wins you a couple games next year, and I think he helps you win a lot more in the future. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, I think the difference between Ivy and Murray is substantial. And I think it would be an incredible mistake to go with Murray at four.
Yeah, when I've heard about Keegan, like, again, preface this with, not a draft guy. But what I've heard about Keegan, it's largely been as like, hey, this is a really good defensive player, and he's a project offensively that, any individual person, you can have varying levels of belief in that development. And I'm aligned with you where it's like, I think especially at the fourth pick, I want to take someone with a higher upside offensively, because like being a very good, solid defensive player is important. Like, don't get me wrong, especially at the wing position. That is one of the most like positions of need in the NBA right now.
Hey, and you're talking to a guy whose team needs it, and I don't want it.
Yeah, desperately. But at the same time, like just watching the playoffs, being a strong defensive player that's an offensive liability, like there are diminishing returns at that. So
Matisse Thybulle, perfect example of that this year, man.
Exactly. So, the Sacramento Kings are in talent acquisition mode, best player available mode, and Keegan Murray is more of a fit as far as like defensively, but he's not the best player available. You jumped up to the fourth
by far not.
Yeah, that's not who you want it for. So I was never really in favor of selecting him fourth, but I was a little shocked that he wasn't in the top 10. And after your reasoning, I'm right there with you. Like, there are much better options.
I know people that don't have him in the lottery, bro. Like, I know people straight up. Yeah, that's the real hot take, is Keegan not in the lotto. I can't see 4 or 5 more players that are better than Keegan. Because he's just like, as far as like, yeah, like he's not going to hit on that star upside that, possibly an AJ or a Shaden would, or, an Ivy or a Jabari or a Chet or a Paolo. And he's not going to be, I don't think he'll be as good of a solid player, like just solid role player, as like a Dyson or a Mathurin would be, or a Duran. But I think he'll still be a good player. I think still like it's one of those things. It's like high, low ceiling, high floor, right? Where it's like he can be like a really low floor player, where he'll be, or sorry, high floor player where he'll be like just very solid coming into the league, but he won't really improve much off that. He'll be like a, low tens, mid teens kind of scorer, solid defender, and he won't really ever push high teens, low 20s in scoring, and he won't be like an absolutely elite defender, but he'll do all the small things you want, and he'll be a valuable enough player that teams will probably end up trading a first or two for him when he's in his prime, just because of how much of a fit he is and how much of everybody, like even Rocco, I think, went for 2 firsts at one point. Like if you're a forward who can shoot and move defensively, like sure, he'll probably be a solid player. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you're picking at 4, you want somebody that's going to be more than a solid non-all-star player, like just basically a role player plus.
Very, very true. And like we've really tried to hammer home, the Kings are in a position where they really just need to be thinking best player available, like
every time.
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, like eliminate whoever is the team above you takes, but you need to be always looking at your big board for best available and like who's going to help us best in the long term when it comes to this draft selection. And I understand the ownership is breathing down the GM's neck, and they want this they want this playoff drought to end, but like you can't rush it. They're like rushing your rebuild ends up making it take longer because you select a guy thinking he's the one that's going to end this drought, and maybe he's more of a project, or maybe he isn't the guy with the long-term upside that could have taken you from being in a position where it's like the drought doesn't end this year, but it ends in like 2 or 3 years, and now we have a more sustainable outlook and a better future outlook as well. Whereas you just drafting a guy to end the drought this year, and maybe he stagnates and you just kind of end up stagnating or even falling off as a result. So
bro, what was our last trade though, to be honest? Like we're pushing for the playoffs. Like you just look at this Savons for Halliburton, we're pushing for the playoffs. Like we're bound to make some stupid ass move too. I know it.
Yeah. A trade.
I'll insulate myself. I think TJ Warren would be like, if we're gonna do something stupid, maybe giving TJ Warren a decent contract, like not something huge, but like I'd rather it more than Oladipo. Let me just say that, because I don't think his injury was like, bro. I think TJ Warren is somebody people are sleeping on this season, low key. Like, bro is 28, and like the injury is like what, plantar fasciitis. It's not like it's not like the guy tore a ligament or broke a bone or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I get what you're saying, but I will counter with the fact that like that wasn't necessarily like a major injury, and yet it still kept him out for like pretty much. What was the last time we've seen TJ Warren?
I mean, that's kind of what makes me more confident that he'll be like actually really good coming back though, is that he's had like so much time to rest and recover, and like when he comes back, he'll be good. He'll be right. Like as opposed to some players who rush coming back and like they fuck it up and don't come back 100%. I genuinely believe when Warren steps back on the court, he will be 100% next year. That's kind of why I'm confident.
I get what you're saying. I think if I'm a team, I'm more looking to give him a short term, like prove it kind of deal, like what Oladipo had to do, just because at the start of Indy's year, there were talks about him coming back mid to late season, and we never saw him. Rumors never picked up that he was working on a return. Like,
it could also be though that they just like season fizzled out. You know what I mean? Like no point in playing him, kind of thing. Like
that's true, but the last time we saw him was also like the last time we saw Jonathan Isaac. So if you want to be concerned about Isaac, I think there's rightful reason to be concerned about TJ Warren. Like Isaac probably a bit more so because he's on a fairly large deal.
Also 2 structural damage injuries. Like with Warren, it's not like I'm not like an expert on plantar fasciitis or whatever it is, but I don't think it's like a super structural injury either. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those where like I'm not saying it's a good move by far. Like I'm saying we are going to make a stupid move, and I would rather give him money than Vic money is pretty much what I'm saying. Like I honestly would, because Vic, I don't know, Vic hasn't looked that hot on Miami to me, like so. And that's the one we've been attached to. I know we've been
Yeah.
attached to like ex-indie players because Sabonis, supposedly there's been a push from Sabonis to bring in guys. We're going for a poverty version of the Bulls. We're always going for a poverty version of something. So you have to understand about the Kings. We're going for a poverty version of the Celtics bench with Davion and DDV, and now we're going for a poverty version of the Bulls where we trade for the passing big man, Sabonis Vucevic, and then we get them to bring in their buddy, either Oladipo or Warren through free agency. We are literally doing the poverty version of other teams right now. I fully expect us to go for one of Oladipo or Warren in an irresponsible contract, and I really hope it's Warren out of the two, and that we move Barnes for somebody who can be decent.
Yeah, I think if Barnes ends up moved, like largely, like, hopefully, like for some kind of like a salary dump, or just you get a couple players back in return. I think that's a win, a win scenario for Sacramento.
I think if you're Sac, you're looking for shooting so bad. So like I would just be snooping around packages for like, if you can get Kevin Huerter, I wouldn't mind it. If you could get even a reclamation project on Joe Harris, I don't think it would be too bad. If you call up the Nets and you're like, we'll send you Barnes, and like we'll take Joe Harris's like dead money basically, and Kessler. I think there might be a little bit of leeway there for a move, Loki. I don't know what the Nets think about Joe Harris still, or whether or not they're confident in his injury, but if they want to get off that contract and they move Kessler, I'd be down for that kind of deal. I think that could be a deal that if they want to push right now, if they intend on keeping KD and Kyrie and all that, maybe they look into that kind of thing. Or like, maybe you call up Denver. I really like Zeke Naji. I'm a huge Zeke Naji fan. I think that
right there with you.
Bro, that guy is fantastic. Like in college, I had him near top 10, if not top 10 in my lottery. The guy was the best mid-range shooting big out of all the bigs in college. I knew he was going to be shooting from three. I had been posting about it before. I'm so glad that Mike Malone has let him shoot from three, because he's literally been one of the best three-point shooters of all time since coming in the league. And without exaggeration, the guy's shooting numbers are insane right now over his 2 seasons. They're not going to be this good, especially when he gets more focused on. But I really think, like, for him, the sky's the limit. I really genuinely believe he could be like a better defensive Christian Wood if he really puts his mind to it. Like, I really, really like Zeke Naji. I'm a guy that if we could trade for him, move Barnes to the Nuggets, I would do that every time. Or even I said about Harris, but Duncan Robinson on the Heat would be a guy that I would also consider. He's completely fallen out of their rotation. And if they have I think they have a first this year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I think they have a late first for some reason.
Okay. I feel like I doubt Miami has a first.
27. Yeah, they have picked 27 actually for whatever reason. Yeah, believe
me. They moved so many of theirs. I'm shocked by that.
Yeah, so if it comes on draft night, D-Rob and 27 comes up, and maybe like I don't know, maybe I want more than that, but it'd be definitely like something I'd consider for Barnes as well, because the salaries work there. And Holmes, I mean, you talked about PJ Washington earlier. I think Holmes and PJ Washington.
Yeah.
It could be an interesting conversation. I think the Hornets probably want more for PJ, so we probably have to include picks, but they do have a need at that big position. So I wouldn't mind Holmes there at all.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, a Rashawn Holmes for PJ Washington swap would probably be very, very beneficial for both teams, actually, because it means Charlotte can actually just draft best player available instead of forcing themselves to pick a big with their lottery selection. And they get a guy who comfortably slots in, and then Sacramento also gets a guy who I think comfortably plays in the front court with Sabonis. Yeah, that's a real win-win scenario, I think.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of that trade since honestly, like last trade deadline. I was hoping they would do it when PJ came on the block. There was a lot of push for that in the Kings group chat. Like Holmes, because we have 2 seconds too. We have an early 30 seconds, so like Holmes and maybe our 2 seconds this year for like PJ. Because I've also heard that PJ just generally isn't happy there, and it's kind of been difficult with him in the front office. So I mean, yeah, I think Holmes is under team control for a while. And the legal issues seem to be cleared up now. I don't want to speak too much on them, but they seem to be cleared up to the point where it's not going to be a problem as far as if they're concerned about him not playing. So, I mean, Yeah, I think it's a trade that could definitely work for both sides. I think the Kings would have to give more than Rashawn. I said as a Kings fan, but I think it's definitely a trade that could be super beneficial. If I were the Hornets, I'd be looking personally to move up to just get Jalen Duren. I think Jalen Duren with LaMelo could be some special basketball. And Bridges, oh my god, bro.
Yeah, the
Defensively,
lobs on that team would be nuts.
defensively and athletic, like the athletic potential and just Bridges and Duren could be something special, man. But it just could be really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we got to talk Kings. We got through so much great draft stuff. I do want to just rapid fire touch on a few prospects that I've heard generally tossed about, maybe in this range. First one, Johnny Davis.
I was gonna ask sort of which prospects you thought belonged in the top 10 that I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say a prospect belongs in this range because # not a draft guy.
True.
But just like other prospects that I've heard projected in this range from other draft people I've listened to, and why you maybe necessarily didn't have them in your top 10. But the first one that comes to mind is Johnny Davis.
I'm super low on Johnny Davis, bro. I'm not gonna have him in my lottery. I'm gonna be honest.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, I think he's just the shot tendency is too high for somebody who's going to just not be that great of a shooter, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't think I think he'll be a pretty decent defender, which is I mean, that's good enough, right? But I just don't see him as being ever really a threat on the offensive end, and as somebody who might be a little too excited to take a shot. I don't want to make the comp to Dylan Brooks because I think Dylan Brooks is way more aggressive defensively. I think they play defense way differently. Like I think Brooks is a way better defender, but are you like a poverty version of that? Like. I'm really not high on him. I've seen like a Casey comp for him as well, but yeah, no, I'm not particularly high on Johnny Davis. I don't think that's a good comp for him. And yeah, it's he'll be like he's willing to guard other players and he's like pretty decently quick, but I don't know. I think he's a guy that's just a little too overzealous on the offensive end for the role he'll actually end up playing in the NBA, and I just don't like his outlook as a shot creator, like just as a shooter in general. Honestly, not even just a shot creator, just a shooter in general.
Fair point. Well, another guy that I've seen, he's really more on the late fringes of the lottery, but I have seen his stock starting to rise, at least among Twitter people. Jeremy Sohan, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, Jeremy Sochan or Sohan or whatever he's a guy that's like he's super defensively versatile and he has actually been rising on my board as well. But the biggest question for him is offensively. Like there's a lot of people who like say he might be like Justice, where it just doesn't click offensively, but like the defense is there, and I could definitely see that like where he's a super versatile defender, able to guard up, guard down, and he's super knowledgeable on that end. But when you have him play offensively, he's just not able to do the things you want to do. We just talked about guys who are super positives on defense and are not necessarily the best offensive players, right? I think Sochan could be that. But I think at the very least, I think he can make himself a neutral. But I think that's also because I'm probably pretty high on him and I have been rising on him as of late just due to seeing a lot of positive feedback on him and stuff like that. So for him, I think, our talk earlier, I wouldn't be having as many second thoughts, but our talk earlier about the trend recently of defensive players who can't stay on the floor offensively, does have me a little bit worried about him, and if I were you, that is a fair point to make. But I do think that I do have like more faith in him just becoming at least a neutral on that end than a guy like Matisse. I do think he's a way better like offensive player than a guy like Matisse personally. It's not as like that bad, you know what I mean? Like Matisse was always pretty bad as an offensive player. So yeah, I don't think it'll be that bad for Sochan, but I mean.
Well, what about between Sohan and Keegan Murray?
Keegan Murray's the better offensive player by far.
Okay.
Better by far, like way better. I mean, like you're looking at a guy who's averaging mid-20s to like a guy that like was already seen as not that great of an offensive college player. So yeah, I mean, I think that the gap is still pretty big between those two offensively. So that puts things into perspective, I guess. He's still like, I think Keegan will be a positive at the end of the day, but Sochan will be like happy to be a neutral, if that makes sense. So,
okay.
but I would say Sochan is probably the better, like will end up as the better specialist defender of the two as well. I think Keegan, dare I say, overrated a little bit defensively just because of high stock numbers, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was really curious as far as like comparing those two, because I've just the description seems so similar. Defensive forwards who have questionable offensive upside. So I just wanted to see how those guys stacked up in your opinion.
Like Keegan's post game and I think his handle and all that, like those things are better immediately off the bat. So I think Keegan, like I'm not saying that Sochan can develop those things, but like it's less likely for him to develop it because I've already seen it. Well, I've already seen more of it in Keegan, so I have more faith in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, we've gone a little long. So there are a few more guys that maybe would have wanted to touch on, but I've taken enough of your time. Got a lot of great stuff here already, and I'm glad that we got to touch on a ton of prospects, just because there are so many possibilities of what Sacramento can do, and as far as moving back and maybe selecting somebody that we don't project as top 5. And so I'm glad we did get to touch on some of the names that won't be immediately in the top 5, because draft night could be wild. Like, maybe we end up missing on this completely because Sacramento trades back for like a pick in the 20s. So who knows?
One thing I did forget to say about Johnny Davis, and I know this is super like we passed it, but one thing I did want to mention that I feel like, and I didn't touch on it, but it's super important, is that his feel of the game is bad. Like that's the biggest thing with Davis that I don't like, is that I think his feel of the game is bad. Not only offensively, like I said, he shoots a lot, but like defensively, his reads are not correct a lot of the time. And despite him trying hard and being willing to guard the best player and having quick feet, it's just I don't like his read in the game on either end, which is why I'm really low on him. Anyways, continue on. Sorry, man.
Yeah. I mean, I had heard Johnny Davis projected like to New Orleans a lot. So, I largely viewed him as top 10 guy. So I guess that's why I just kind of questioned why he wasn't there for you. So
Knicks at 11 wouldn't be bad. I think
that's the other spot.
Ben Mathurin or my God, could you imagine I was thinking about this the other day. Adrian Griffin, that shooting potential. Oh my God, as a prospect, like next to Zion. Oh,
that's another spot I've seen him like fall to, and still salty about the Pelicans getting our pick. But you know what?
Oh man, bro. And like some of these guys would be real nice next to Brandon Davis, but I think you guys would probably go for a trade realistically.
Yeah, the pick would end up getting. It happens. It's like it pretty much happened every like we've surprisingly had our pick. Like last year's draft, we had it ends up being moved in the Russ deal. And like I was looking up prospects in that 20 range, like up until like day of the Russ trade. And so that devastated me. Still to this day, I'm like, there were so many like shooters and players I wanted in that draft, but here we are. I
do want to ask you one thing before we get out of here. And it's completely off topic, but congrats on hiring Darvin Ham, and how you feel about that?
Oh yeah, the Darvin Ham hire, like it's kind of a question mark just as a assistant who's never been a head coach. But when you do get one of those jobs, like you definitely want to see a guy getting praise from everywhere. You want to see it being like someone who's well respected. Like the fact that Giannis is happy that Darvin Ham got the hire, like that means something. That not because Darvin's going to be able to potentially poach Giannis away, but like, if players have a bond with this guy, like that means, maybe Darvin Ham's able to poach away good assistant coaches on the Bucks staff. Maybe, players around the league see Darvin Ham get hired and say, this is a good, smart offensive coach. I wouldn't mind playing for him. And the Lakers are more of a free agency option than they would have been if, Doc Rivers got hired or something like that. So
yeah, that's true.
I really like the hire. He seemed like a smart guy. I'm like still patiently waiting to see the rest of the coaching staff filled out, because first time head coach, you're kind of banking on like hoping there's an established former head coach that's going to be on the staff there. I really want to see like other names of like high profile assistants that have been well sought after in other positions. But I'm generally really happy with the entire hiring process that the Lakers went through, and that it wasn't a clown show. It was like just a quiet, we're searching, we're interviewing candidates multiple times. Like we got some crazy stories out of it, but I think they did the due diligence correctly. So I'm
At least
happy.
it's not Stotts, bro. At least it's not Stotts. And the thing is if you guys could add any other coach, I talked about it towards the tail end of last episode, but like if you guys could add Adrian Griffin next to, because he's already a head assistant, so it would just be the same position, right? And if he wants to come over and work at over at the Lakers with Darvin Ham, I think that would be so good with Russ. I think if you want to, you guys clearly are trying to look. Sorry, man, trying to look to get Russ right. I really don't think you guys are trading Russ. I would be highly surprised. I hope and wish for you guys and your fans that you can trade Russ. I have my doubts that any team is really going to take him on. So if you're looking for a guy to get Russ right, I think having Adrian Griffin as your assistant next to Darvin Ham would be so good. Like, yeah, I wanted Darvin Ham as our like second choice personally. I had Adrian Griffin as the first Kings choice, but Darvin Ham was my second choice. So really happy to see you guys do it. I don't have this like Kings or Lakers hatred than a lot of people have, because I wasn't watching in 2005 or whatever. I was like 5, 6 years old. So.
But yeah, I do want to thank you again for your time hopping on the show with me today and your insight on the Kings. I think it's invaluable to have someone within the team come and talk to me. So, now that you've done that twice, I especially huge thanks. And if you're listening, if you're watching, make sure you go and support Dimitri at KangzDraft on Twitter. Go follow and support the work that he's doing with the draft and the content that I'm sure will be coming out once the Kings draft pick happens, when Summer League starts to roll in and the Kings season does start to begin. Fingers crossed. We're rooting for the Kings this season and for Dimitri.
I appreciate that, man.
And we want the this channel. We want the draft. Drought to end this season. So I'm rooting for that.
16 years. Hopefully we can get somebody that's. I think the keys are just making the right pick at 4 and trading Barnes for something good. Those are if I can summarize this whole pod to 2 things that the Kings need to do this offseason, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Get a good Barnes trade. Don't fuck up at 4. Just that's it. I would have said the third thing is hire a good coach, but we've Brown is okay. Like we've done that, so yeah, it's not as bad as like fucking Mark Jackson or like Steve Clifford. So.
Yeah, very true. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on all platforms. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to also go and support Dimitri at KangzDraft. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.